Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business news, Nigeria's power sector loses $191 million in just 7 weeks. And in your sports, Libya begins preparations ahead of their Africa Cup of Nations clash against South Africa on March the 22nd. Let's start in Germany, where Chancellor Angela Merkel says her country will provide stronger military support for Burkina Faso in a consulting role. This comes amid a worsening security situation in the West African country. Chancellor Merkel met Burkina Faso's President Roch Marc Kabore in Berlin. Ira Spitzer reports.
Burkina Faso's President Roch Marc Kabore paid a 2-day visit to Berlin amid a security crisis at home. The country, which borders Mali, has been a target of continued attacks from Islamist insurgents. Now, Berlin says it plans to increase its engagement to include consulting.
Additionally, Germany is ready to agree to a consulting agreement with Burkina Faso through our defense ministry. A few legal questions need to be clarified, but that is already underway at a meeting of our defense ministries today. But we're taking concrete steps in light of the very concrete threat.
The German military currently takes part in the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali. But there are no plans to deploy German troops in Burkina Faso or elsewhere in the region, as France recently did in Chad to protect the government there. The president's visit comes at a precarious time for Burkina Faso. According to a UN report published earlier this week, more than 100,000 people there have been displaced as a result of conflict, mostly over the past 2 months. President Kabore says he welcomes the outside help from Germany and other countries.
We are open to all partnerships that could allow us to ensure our territory is defended on a much larger scale and liberate us from this scourge that has been undermining the sub-Saharan region for a number of years. As I said to the Chancellor, how many schools are closed today in different countries because of terrorism?
The two countries would like to engage on more than just security. Burkina Faso hopes to benefit from Germany's G20 Compact with Africa initiative to spur private investment on the continent. But for that to happen, the security situation needs to improve. Ira Spitzer, CGTN, Berlin.
Nigeria's President Muhammadu Buhari has urged Nigerians to go out and vote in Saturday's postponed election. He has promised adequate security in the election that pits him in a tight race with businessman and former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. There are still another 72 candidates gunning for the top position. The Independent National Electoral Commission announced a week's delay to voting in the early hours of last Saturday. Well, we have teams following developments in Nigeria, and let's now cross over to Richard Nta. He's in Abuja with the very latest on that election. Richard.
All right, thank you so much, Beatrice. To the viewers across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining CGTN's continued coverage of Nigeria's elections. I'm Richard Cyril Nta, live in the capital, Abuja. We also have our correspondents all over the country. We're going to talk to two of them, starting with Deji Badmus. Deji, how are things looking on the ground?
Well, Richard, things are calm and everybody is getting ready for the election. Of course, no thanks to that postponement, we might not see a very huge turnout, but let's just hope that all the actions or all the measures that have been taken, not just by the government, by individual unions like, say, the petroleum union now cutting down on petrol price, the airlines slashing down on fares. We just hope all of those actions will be able to galvanize voters to come out or travel to cast their votes. Richard?
All right. And we also have Kelechi Mekalam. What can you tell us? Kelechi Mekalam, we're still expecting to hear from you. What can you tell us? What's the latest on the ground on your side?
Okay, yes, Richard. Well, there's so much going on here. Most people are trying to travel to cast their votes. You know, since the elections were being postponed last weekend, lots of people had to come back to town to work. But then we had a few people who were also trying to leave town to go back to their base where they registered to vote. The town is gradually becoming empty, and there's been lots of businesses are beginning to wind down today. Most people are just practically in election mode at the moment. Richard?
Okay, Deji Badmus, Kelechi Mekalam, thank you for that brief update. We shall be coming right back to you before the show is over. Moving on, though, let's give you an update of what's happening here in Nigeria. INEC says they are ready for the elections. The chairman has said all election materials will be delivered to all states except one by the end of Friday. The Nigeria Independent Electoral Commission has denied any collusion with any political party to rig the elections. As a matter of fact, high security is on alert. There will be scanned biometric identity cards that will be scanned by handheld devices to voters to prevent fraud while they are conducting the election. So much going on, and we shall give you the update as the show goes on.
INEC works with the Nigeria Police as the lead agency, and based on assessment of threat and the level of assistance that the police requires, it can then call on other security agencies, including the military. There is no way INEC can suffer from shortfall of staff. So the Commission is unaware that we have any shortfall of staff for any of the categories I described.
And yes, campaigning ended yesterday, Thursday, by midnight. All systems go. Nigerians are ready to elect their lawmakers and their leaders this Saturday. Phil Ihaza has more on that story.
Campaign activities have been intense in Nigeria over the last 3 months, until they were halted by INEC last Thursday ahead of an election that never took place. So parties were able to resume their political campaigns for a few more days, ending 24 hours ahead of Saturday. The effect of the disruption to the campaign is unclear.
The politicians and the political parties themselves, they needed to put finishing touches to what they had done before and to make more outreach to the electorate in order to sway them to their side. So it's very, very necessary for them. However, I cannot be able to tell you whether the extension had made any impact or not. It's only them that will know whether the 3 days or a couple of days which they have been granted to go around has actually given them brighter chances or not. So we can only keep our fingers crossed and we wait to the D-Day and see what will be the total outcome of the whole exercise.
There are over 84 million eligible voters across the country. Although there are 73 aspirants running for president, the race to lead Nigeria for another 4 years is mainly between the incumbent Muhammadu Buhari and his main challenger, Atiku Abubakar, a former vice president. Many voters say the extended campaigns have not swayed them.
I think the reason for the campaign is even to further remind people, you understand, to even come out and vote, not basically because of their manifesto or anything. It's just for people to remember that, okay, the vote is still going to be happening on Saturday.
The extension did not influence me not to change or to change my mind concerning the person that I want to vote before or now. No. It's the same mind that I have in the beginning until the end of the election.
It's only if you're not sure that the campaign will change. But if you're already sure from the start, you know who you're voting for. I don't think 3 days campaign would change anything.
And these voters are hoping that the presidential elections will actually go ahead this time.
Last weekend was hugely controversial and disruptive in Nigeria, but millions of voters are now focused on exercising their civic rights in deciding who leads Africa's most populous nation. Phil Ihaza, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
All right, Phil Ihaza, what can you tell us? What's latest on the ground, 24 hours to the elections? What's new on your side?
Well, thank you, Richard. Yes, I'm Philip Haza and I'm reporting live in Abuja. We've actually been to a couple of polling units in the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, in the city, the heart of the city, and across several polling units, in the outskirts, the suburbs, like the one I'm at right now. There's actually no activity going on here. It's peaceful, it's calm. That's because, of course, the polling unit will be officially open to millions of voters tomorrow, 8 a.m. Prompt. And that's because the arrival of materials and personnel are also expected to be here at 7 a.m. an hour before the polling unit opens. I mean, we'll have over 120,000 polling units across the country to conduct the polls for over 84 million people. So yes, what is trending right now is the fact that people are traveling to the various locations to ensure that they are ready, they are set for one of the most historic moments in Nigeria, talking about democracy. So yes, I'm at the polling unit and this is how far we can see for now. Richard?
All right, thank you, Phil. Let's move over to our correspondent, Robert Nagila. Robert, less than 24 hours to the election. What stands out for you where you are?
Well, the security preparations in Nigeria at this moment and around the electoral process are now at an advanced stage. It's a public holiday in Nigeria today. This is to allow members of the public to travel to their respective stations where they registered as voters and where they'll be able to cast their ballots as well. Now, we expect a curfew to come into force from midnight Saturday all the way to 4 p.m. Saturday. No vehicles in that time will be allowed on the roads and highways across the entire country. The only vehicles allowed will be those of the Electoral Commission and their staff, security forces, observers, and of course journalists like me who are covering this election. Now, Nigeria's land borders, as we saw last week, just before the postponement, will also be shut for a period of about 48 hours, beginning later tonight, running all the way to Sunday. Add on to that the tens of thousands of security forces, policemen who will be deployed across the entire country to provide security for this exercise. To give you an idea of the scale of the operation, we're talking about 119,000 polling stations scattered across the entire country. All of them will require a security presence of about 2, 3, or 4 police officers in some cases. In terms of the military, we do not expect to see any military soldiers at the polling stations. However, we are advised that they will provide backup to the police if and when they will be required. At the moment, life around Lagos appears to be scaling down because of this public holiday as more people travel to where they are going to vote come tomorrow. Richard?
All right, Phil and Robert, once again, thank you for that excellent reporting. Speak to you really, really soon. Moving on, the delayed elections have not deterred Nigerians. Nigerians are traveling all across the country to cast their vote. Let's take a look at this story.
A week ago, Nigeria's Election Commission announced a delay in polls, saying it needs more time to ensure a free and fair vote. This raised concerns that the decision could lead to a low turnout. But a day to the polls, the situation is different.
I'm living here in Kano. I'm traveling in the east to cast my vote because that's where I register. And after the vote, I pray that Atiku will win.
I registered in the east. Then I need to traveling to perform as the citizenship of a Nigerian. Then that's for votes. Is any other thing? I'm living in Kano, but after the election I will come back. It's because of the election. That's why I'm traveling to east to go and present myself.
I registered in my place, that's in Oyo town, Oyo state. So, and it is necessary for me to go back and vote. Then by next week I will come back to Bauchi. I'm presently in Kano now just to take a bus going to Lagos. Then from there I go to Ibadan.
In a move to encourage voters to travel again for the polls, Nigerian fuel suppliers have cut the price of petrol. The National Union of Road and Transport Workers will also provide discounts to travelers looking to travel to their respective voting points. And if this is not enough, 2 airlines have offered discounts to people who showed their voting cards. The much-anticipated vote has attracted 74 candidates, but it's ultimately expected to be a head-to-head between the incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari and former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. Chomhono, CGTN.
And now a few questions for our political analyst, Jibrin Ibrahim, analyst and director for the Center for Democracy and Development. Jibrin, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us here on CGTN Africa Live. First and foremost, before we delve into our hard-hitting questions, this is a very different election. A lot of Nigerians and a lot of voters are keeping their desired candidate close to their chest. They're not really talking about who they're going to vote. Do you find that strange?
Not at all, because it's a very delicate election. There's a lot of hot language exchange. There has been so much hate speech out there. So I think that's partly why not too many people are showing clearly which side they're on.
Okay. In your own opinion, would you say Nigeria is calm and ready for this Saturday?
I think the country is ready. The Electoral Commission is ready. Last week, it turned out they were not ready. I was at the briefing by the INEC chairman yesterday, and all indications from our observers in the field is that the sensitive voting materials have arrived. They are being distributed in wards and local governments currently, so we will vote tomorrow.
Okay, and what would you say are the key factors that will determine this election?
I think there are three key factors that will determine the election. One is corruption, the second is security, and the third is ethno-regionalism. On corruption, there are two perspectives. One side says President Buhari has not done enough in the struggle against corruption, and that he has looked away when some of his close associates have been caught with corruption. The other side says no, he has shown a determination to fight corruption, and that we've never fought corruption so effectively as we are doing under President Buhari. On the question of ethno-regionalism, I think it's a very strange thing, because both candidates, both leading candidates, are Fulani, the same ethnic group, are both Muslims, and are both from the north. But there's a strong perception that people who tend to be Christian see Atiku as a preferred candidate, and those who are Muslim tend to see Buhari as a better candidate. And this is because of issues around conflicts between pastoralists and farmers over the last 2 to 3 years, which has thrown in a sharp divide. On the third issue of security, I think there's a big debate. Buhari had fought 2015 elections on the basis that he'll be an effective fighter in terms of restoring security to the country. And at the end of his 4 years, Nigerians are divided. Some people feel he has made considerable progress. Others feel that insecurity has never been this bad in recent history. So these are the divides along which Nigerians will vote tomorrow.
Well, let's talk about voters that would probably miss out on electing their president and lawmakers. It's just been reported that over 1 million voters may not have their permanent voter register cards, will be ineligible to vote. Does that concern you in any way?
Actually, the numbers are much higher than that. We have 84 million registered voters, and those who have collected their permanent voters card are just 72 million. So there are 12 million cumulatively who have not picked up their cards. However, these numbers are cumulative. They date back to 2010 when the registration occurred. So over that time, many people never picked up their cards. It is assumed that a lot of them are dead, and a lot of them have decided they are not going to vote. The fact of the matter is that the 72 million Nigerians who are eligible to vote are enough for a country this size. Most people who didn't pick up their cards and wanted to couldn't do it because they went very late. These cards have been distributed for months on end, and people waited till the last week to pick up their cards. That shows a certain lack of enthusiasm to engage the elections. So I don't think that will be a major factor as we go out to vote tomorrow.
Okay, and before I let you go, what would you say, or what can you tell us about Nigeria's progress as a democracy? Do you have any parting words?
I think the key issue is that in First Republic, democracy lasted 5 years. In the Second Republic, democracy lasted 4 years. In this republic, democracy has lasted 20 years, 2 decades of consolidated democratic rule. Nigerians feel they don't have enough democracy, and I'll agree with them. However, we have been able to sustain a democratic regime, and people have been able to express themselves. Their rights have been respected more or less, and I feel democracy remains positive, progressive, and on the march.
Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, thank you for your parting words. Thank you very much for joining us here on CGTN. As mentioned, we have our correspondents all over the country, and we will go to Deji and Kelechi Emekelam. First to you, Deji. Again, 24 hours to the elections. What is the pulse of the nation, in your opinion? Deji.
Well, Richard, what I can tell you is that those who are really eager to vote are eager to do so. But of course, it's the postponement of the elections certainly would have dampened some people's spirit. Some people would definitely not be traveling back to their bases now to vote, but quite a number of people would vote. I mean, die-hard supporters of these politicians would definitely come out to vote. But one thing is certain, Richard, a lot of people want to see this process come and go. I mean, it's dragged on for too long. We all thought it was going to happen last Saturday. Hopefully it's going to happen tomorrow. So a lot of people want to see this come and go so that they can move on with their lives. I mean, whoever wins, then we can just move on with our lives. So everywhere is calm, and hopefully the election would come and go smoothly. Of course, don't expect that there wouldn't be any incident at all, but the hope is that it wouldn't be anything major at all, and that maybe by this time on Tuesday, or probably Monday, late on Monday, we would know who has won this election, and then Nigeria can just move on, and we prepare for the next election in 4 years' time. But people will definitely come out, especially those who are die-hard supporters of the candidates. They will definitely troop out to vote. But we're watching, we're waiting to see if the turnout in this election would be higher than what we had in 2015 and, of course, in 2011. The number of those who have collected their PVCs quite high, but let's just wait and see if close to that 72 million will come out on election day to vote. Richard?
All right, Deji, thank you for that update. Deji, let's get Kelechi Emekelam in and talk to her about the women's voice, and the role of women in this upcoming elections. Kelechi.
Well, yes, Richard. Interestingly, Nigerians this time are very aware of the power of their votes, and this includes the women. I'll take it from two perspectives: women who are seeking political offices and women voters. Now, women contribute a substantial number of the voting population at about 47%. Women voters contribute a substantial amount. Now, but only a fraction of women participate in politics. It's about there were 6 female presidential candidates, and the strongest female presidential candidate, who was Obi Ezekwesili, actually withdrew from the race about a month back. And also just recently, another female candidate from the National Interest Party stepped down and gave the PDP candidate her support. Access to resources for women politicians is a big challenge. There's also the cultural and religious issues that play a big role in women's participation in politics. But there's still a good number of women that are seeking elective offices at various levels. But people are looking to have more women participate in politics, Richard.
All right, thank you, Kelechi Mekalam. Let's thank all our correspondents for excellent reporting. Deji, Kelechi, Phil, and Robert will be back at 17 GMT. And for now, it's right back to you in the studio, Beatrice.
Richard, thank you. And of course, we'll follow the coverage of our CGTN team in Nigeria throughout today and tomorrow in preparation for Nigeria's election. Well, let's now go to another election in Africa. Senegal goes to the poll this Sunday in a presidential contest. The country's incumbent Macky Sall will compete with 4 other candidates for the seat. Macky Sall comes up against 2 political heavyweights and 2 fresh aspirants. Ex-Prime Minister Idrissa Seck and former Foreign Affairs Minister Madické Niang will be the main threat. He's seeking his final 5-year mandate. The 57-year-old is expected to win the vote after his 2 most formidable opponents were barred from contesting due to allegations of graft. And residents in Senegal are eager to cast their vote and elect a suitable leader.
This is not our first time to take care of election in this country. We're used to it, so no problem. We're waiting for the date to come and everybody's going to vote. You know, before election, a lot of talk going in the city because of, you know, diversity of opinion. You know, but when time comes like to choose one, you're going to choose a president, and that's it. No problem.
You're watching Africa Live. Coming up on the program, Kenya defends border in ongoing dispute with Somalia over wells in the Indian Ocean. And still in the country, Kenya postpones a ruling on a law that bans gay sex.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. My home country lies at the foot of Africa, the southernmost tip of our beautiful continent, and the unique point at which 2 great oceans meet. Now on a clear day in Cape Town, you can just make out Robben Island, the place where Nelson Mandela was jailed for so long. South Africa has changed so much in the years since then, but it is this country's history that shaped me and took me into reporting. I'm inspired by Africa's men and women of courage. It's the everyday hero who brings out my passion. The creatives, the decision makers, the risk takers who are shaping a bright African future. I see them in Cape Town. I see them in the pulsating city of Johannesburg. I see them across the continent, and I know our time has come.
CGTN is a platform where African voices can speak for themselves and take their stories to the world. My name is Lindy Mtongana, and I'm a news anchor and reporter for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Kenya has warned that it will not relinquish an inch of its soil in the disputed maritime border with Somalia. The Kenyan government has agreed on a roadmap to resolve the dispute with Somalia. The cabinet has also discussed measures for safeguarding territorial integrity, marine resources, including offshore oil and gas exploration acreage in the Indian Ocean. Kenya recently recalled its ambassador in Mogadishu and ordered the Somali envoy out of the country over alleged auctioning of oil and gas blocks in the disputed area. Kenya's sea boundary dispute with Somalia has been simmering for years. In 2014, Somalia sued Kenya at the International Court of Justice, asking for a proper determination of the sea border between the 2 countries. But let's get more on this story now. CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello is joining me live from Mogadishu. Abdulaziz, Kenya accuses Somalia of being dishonest in its response on the auctioning of the oil blocks. Has the government of Somalia, though, responded to that allegation?
Well, Beatrice, the Somali government is also of the same view that it is entitled to the protection of its own independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity, just as Monica Juma, the Kenyan cabinet secretary, yesterday said in that statement. But then again, there is no official statement on that note from the federal government of Somalia. What we understand is that probably by the end of today or tomorrow, there might be a statement in regards to the statement that was released yesterday by Kenyan foreign ministry officials. But what we know so far is the Somali government has insisted that Kenya is just acted in a manner that was not right, the expelling of the Somali ambassador and also recalling its ambassador over alleged sale of oil blocks. So Somalia is insisting that there was no auctioning that took place. Only whatever happened at that conference in London was the presentation of data to potential oil investors so that they can come and invest in the oil and gas sector in Somalia, and Somalia can move from donor aid and to self-sufficiency. So we are expecting a statement by the end of today in regards to Monica Juma's statement, Beatrice.
So exactly what is the Somali government's position on the oil blocks? Has there been an auction or not?
Well, there was a conference, Beatrice, that took place in London on the 7th of February that was strongly opposed also by Kenyan officials and opposition lawmakers here in Somalia. They were arguing that Somalia is the process of oil and gas and the awarding of contracts and bids was shrouded in secrecy. But Somalia, and including the Somali president, even talked about the issue. Whatever happened in London was just a presentation of seismic data that was conducted by a company known as Spectrum. Spectrum was given that contract by the former Somali administration that was headed by President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud, who was defeated in the last election. So whatever transpired in London was presentation of data. Foreign companies attended that event, and the issue that created a lot of concern was a map that was used in that conference. Kenya insists that that map was illegal, but Somalia says the map is in accordance to its own set of principles and international jurisdiction. It's saying that that disputed territory, even though it's still disputed, Somalia believes that it belongs to Somalia, and it presented that map in that format to potential oil investors. And the seismic data survey that was done showed oil and gas reserves in that disputed area. But Somalia says going to sell or auction that disputed area until the International Court of Justice clears the maritime dispute with Kenya and either allows Somalia or Kenya to take that. After that, it's when it's going to do the auctioning bid.
Abdulaziz Bello joining us with that update from Mogadishu. And we are staying on Kenya for the moment. A court has postponed the decision to rule on the penal code that criminalizes same-sex relationships. Members of the LGBTI community in Kenya expected the ruling that would finally ensure they are able to enjoy total rights and provisions availed to the greater population. In Kenya, homosexuality is a taboo subject and is punishable under Kenya's penal code by up to 14 years in jail. The sitting judge cited backlog in court cases, conflicting schedules and sensitivity of the case as reasons for the postponement. The ruling has been pushed to May the 24th. Pro-gay groups want sections of the Kenyan Penal Code that criminalizes gay sex scrapped.
We have had a few challenges, and we are not blaming anyone for that reason. One of our colleagues is still on leave. He has had to sacrifice a number of days of his leave. One of our colleagues is outside Nairobi. She has had to sacrifice her time to come here to get us together. They have asked me to ask you give us up to May.
That's okay. That's all right.
And that is why the notice would not have helped. So I'm here to answer any questions if there are.
Well, Ashtatol looks at the contentious issues around the law and why it has attracted so much attention.
It's a colonial law imposed nearly 89 years ago. But today, it has very real consequences for Kenya's LGBTI community. Section 162 of the country's penal code makes it illegal to engage in any same-sex relations. Felix Kasanda, a high-profile activist, waited with anticipation to hear the court's ruling on a motion to repeal the law. The court postponed their decision until May 24th. A few more months for Felix to wait.
LGBTI community are living in Kenya like refugees. We don't live here as Kenyans because we can't access any human right. As a gay person in Kenya, you can't, unless you hide your sexuality.
LGBTI community members face discrimination and also blackmail in Kenya. Felix was expelled from school, rejected by his family and employers for being openly gay. Campaigners argue Section 182 violates Kenya's 2010 Constitution. The progressive Constitution guarantees equality, dignity, and privacy for all citizens. But in a conservative society like Kenya, views are split on the matter.
It shouldn't be legalized. I don't think it should be legalized. However, people are free to do whatever they want. It's their life. But again, we don't want to impose it on the law. And we, as Kenya, we are a godly nation. So we want to follow the natural order of things, the way they were placed.
I think why should we agree to polygamy, then we don't agree to the same sex? You see, it doesn't make sense. So I think they should allow same-sex marriages.
Activists hope by repealing the law, LGBTI members can live more freely, still facing prejudice, but ending the fear of arrest and blackmail. Astatal, CGTN.
Now, since the 10th Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo in August last year, more than 800 people have been infected with the Ebola virus. This continued outbreak has become the second largest epidemic in the 43-year history of human beings fighting deadly viruses. Take a look.
February 21st at the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The African Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the World Health Organization discuss latest developments in Ebola virus vaccines and drugs, as well as prevention and treatment.
As of yesterday, we recorded 848 cases in DRC, including 529 deaths of Ebola. This includes confirmed and probable cases.
According to the World Health Organization, the mortality rate of the Ebola virus infection in DRC has reached 62%. Women and children account for a very high proportion of the epidemic. UNICEF statistics say 59% of confirmed and suspected cases are currently reported. For children under 5, about 30% of cases are reported. The WHO says the security situation remains the biggest challenge in fighting the epidemic.
The security situation is very challenging. When you look at North Kivu, over the past 20 years, I've been seeing this armed conflict and population being terrorized by armed groups. So there are areas that are very difficult to access, and we are obliged to work under very restrictive security, measures, including using escort to access to certain areas. And it's very challenging for our teams. But we are committed to protect the population, so we use all necessary means to access to where the virus is, and we'll continue to do that until the outbreak is over.
Since the Ebola outbreak in 2018, the epidemic in the Kivu region of the DRC has gradually shifted from remote villages to densely populated cities such as Beni and Butembo. For various economic and personal reasons, the uncontrollable population movements have brought greater challenges to control.
The China government has deployed experts in neighboring countries, in Uganda and other countries there, where it's very important that we not just focus in the DRC, but we also focus in the neighboring countries just in case that the virus escape. We should be able to quickly detect it and stop it there. So the Chinese government have contributed significantly there, especially in Uganda.
He says the Chinese government has made a huge contribution in trying to respond to the spread of the Ebola outbreak. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Nigeria's power sector loses $191 million in just 7 weeks. And $5.48 billion worth of contracts are inked at the Abu Dhabi Defense Exhibition.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria's advisory power team at the Office of the Vice President says the nation's power sector has lost $191 million between January 1st and February 19th this year due to the persistent challenges in the industry. APT says the loss was due to insufficient gas supply to power generation plants, as well as inadequate distribution and transmission infrastructure. The data shows that a total of 2,333 megawatts of electricity was not produced due to the deficiency of gas on February the 19th. The data further shows that 32.5 megawatts of power were not produced as a result of the unavailability of transmission infrastructure, while 543 megawatts was not produced due to high frequency as a result of the scarcity of distribution infrastructure. South African mobile telecommunications giant MTN may once again find itself in hot water, this time over a possible bribe dating back 14 years. The case involves the awarding of mobile operating licenses in Iran. An Iranian operating license was awarded to Turkcell in 2005, but the decision was reversed in MTN's favor. While MTN set up its network in Iran, Turkcell filed a $4.2 billion lawsuit. Sumitra Naidu has more.
A few days ago, the Hawks Special Investigating Unit arrested South Africa's former ambassador to Iran. Yusuf Saluji allegedly earned around $100,000 for facilitating a bribe to ensure MTN won the bid to set up a mobile network in Iran.
Let's assume that the South African courts end up ruling that MTN was indeed involved in corrupt activities, therefore it did not obtain the license rightfully. South Africa doesn't have any jurisdiction over Iran. So the Iranian government would take that into consideration and then decide, do they actually find merit in this? Do they want to conduct their own investigation? Or do they just leave it as is?
MTN just settled a hefty $53 million fine with Nigeria in January this year for transferring money out of the country without the central bank's knowledge. Nigeria is MTN's most profitable country in Africa, while Iran has grown into MTN's second biggest market. It has a 49% stake in Irancell with over 43 million subscribers.
In Iran, MTN isn't seen like how it is seen at times in Nigeria, as a company that is abusive of tax regulations and is looking for loopholes. It's actually well regarded. And also in this current sanctions atmosphere, it's very unlikely that Iran's going to kick out one of its key investors.
President Cyril Ramaphosa was the chair of MTN's board at the time of the alleged bribe. His role is also being brought into question.
The task of the board is to provide a strategic direction for a company and assist with formulating future overarching strategy. So I think it will be very difficult for President Ramaphosa to be held accountable for what was happening with MTN in Iran at the time, just because he was probably too removed from the actual events that were taking place.
The case is still being investigated and it's not yet clear if there was any wrongdoing by MTN. The Johannesburg-based mobile operator has repeatedly refuted claims of underhandedness in obtaining its operating license in Iran. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egypt has hosted this year's solar and wind exhibition in the capital, Cairo. The event brings together key stakeholders in the solar energy industry from different countries. It is dedicated at advancing the renewable energy sectors across the MENA region. CGTN's Yasa Hakim has more.
For the last few years, Egypt has been tapping the solar energy sector as an alternative to the more expensive fuel energy. And the solar show in Cairo has brought together companies that are interested in investing in the North African country.
I think Egypt is a great market for solar energy because of many reasons. Firstly, Egypt has a very good sun, very good night resources. Secondly, and the price of the solar energy and has dropped, and also, but for the traditional energy and has been increased a lot in Egypt. So it is the right moment to introduce the solar energy into Egypt.
Local and international companies are showcasing their products, including Chinese manufacturers who have a strong presence at the show.
We are the biggest polysilicon manufacturer in the world, and we are the fifth biggest PV module supplier in the world. We are the biggest non-state-owned investor, PV module investor in the world. The target of our technology is to reduce the cost of this material to provide our value, more additional value to this industry development.
The government has recently offered incentives for solar power companies that includes a favorable pricing mechanism.
Very fair regulation and an investment atmosphere which will create the attraction for the investors from abroad, for them to come with confidence to your lovely country. We love Egypt, by the way, as Turkish people. We like being here. So the investors need stability in economy, in politics, to come and invest.
The largest solar panel farm in the world was inaugurated last year in Aswan, Upper Egypt, producing 1,425 megawatts. The government hopes to reach an output of 1.8 gigawatt from the solar power by 2020 and cover 25% of the electricity grid by 2022.
With the huge potential in solar power and the latest discoveries in natural gas, the government hopes it has managed to guarantee a sustainable and cheap source of energy for decades to come. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The 14th International Defense Exhibition and Conference has come to a close with a record setting of $5.48 billion worth of contracts signed between the UAE and weapon makers. The UAE's armed forces closed around $109.7 million deal on the final day of the fair, bumping the total volume of signed contracts to $5.48 billion compared to the previous $5.2 billion sealed in 2017. The organizers' official data has shown that around 65% of the military purchases was made with companies outside the United Arab Emirates and the rest with domestic armories. The Arab nation in recent years has been seeking to shift away from its traditional oil industry and use the defense exhibition to promote the development and creation of job opportunities in the country. And coming up in your sports news, Libya begins preparations ahead of their Africa Cup of Nations clash against South Africa on March the 22nd.
Africa, where champions are made, records are broken, legends are born. We're there for every goal, for every knockout,